This is Democracy Watch. So, Mark, Trump's first criminal trial is underway right now in New York. I want to point your attention to a tweet that's gained some attention on the right and throughout the rest of the ecosystem as well. A conservative internet provocateur, his name is Klay Travis. He wrote, "If you're a Trump supporter in New York City who is part of the jury pool, do everything you can to get seated on the jury and then refuse to convict as a matter of principle, dooming the case via hung jury. It's the most patriotic thing you could possibly do." Mark, is this instruction legal? Because it sounds like jury tampering.
Okay, so it's not the most patriotic thing you could do. It's the most illegal thing you could do. So, I strongly recommend, if you are listening to someone named Klay Travis, you probably need a lawyer, okay? Because you are not allowed to lie to the judge during jury selection. And the judge during jury selection will ask every prospective juror a series of questions. Some of the questions the court has come up with, some of the questions the two parties have come up with, other questions will come up along the way. But fundamental to all of the questions are, can you be fair? Do you have an open mind? Will you follow the evidence? And are you able to render a verdict based on that evidence? So to the extent whoever Mr. Travis is suggesting to you that you do something other than that, don't do it. Don't lie. Get off the jury if you are unable to be open-minded. If you purposely get on a jury and have a closed mind, it sometimes comes up. The other jurors will actually rat you out during deliberations. They'll be like, this one juror wouldn't deliberate. Bad idea.
Now, would this guy, Klay Travis himself, have any legal exposure for suggesting as much?
Now, do we know if Klay Travis is actually a real person? Or is he just like an internet account, right? But look,
just like one of Elon's manifestations.
I mean, I've been dealing with this over the last few days. There's one guy who's like, Mark, how does it feel to have lost that big case when you worked in the White House? And I'm like, I never worked in the White House. Now he's fighting on the internet with other people that he thinks I did work in the White House. But in any event, look, I don't think a judge is going to track down Klay Travis. With all due respect to Mr. Travis's profile, he's just not going to be worth it. I mean, theoretically, he would have legal exposure for this, but he would say it's just First Amendment speech. But look, I think that really the liability here would be on anyone dumb enough to follow Travis's advice.
Now, how confident are you that the prosecutors would be able to weed out any moles that did make their way onto a jury?
Yeah, so it's not just the prosecutors, right? It's the judge. So don't overestimate the role of the parties in jury selection versus the judge, right? They all play a role here, but judges have this judge in particular, who's very experienced, has overseen the choosing of a lot of juries and a lot of high-profile cases, and they have ways of asking and re-asking questions that are intended to ferret out these kinds of moles, as you put it. They gather a lot of information. They ask them a lot of questions. It doesn't mean that once in a blue moon they don't get through. But between the judge's questions and the ability of the prosecutors to strike jurors who just give them a gut sense, each side gets a certain number of what are called preemptory challenges, which is basically you get to challenge them for no reason as long as it's not a legal reason, just based on a gut sense. The prosecutors, who also have done a lot of jury selection in Manhattan, in New York City, will have the ability to strike those people as well.
Okay. Now, moving on to day one of the trial itself, Trump was complaining that the judge wasn't allowing him to attend his son's high school graduation. First of all, that's not true. The judge didn't even rule on that question yet. But more broadly, what's your reaction to this sense of victimhood from the guy who's charged with committing 34 felonies?
I'm sorry, I fell asleep. Look, this guy is sleeping through his own trial, Donald Trump. He's nodding off and sleeping through his own trial. Could you imagine if he actually went to Barron's high school graduation, how much sleeping he would do? He'd catch up on he'd get an entire mid-afternoon nap. I doubt that Donald Trump actually intended or intends to go to Barron's high school graduation. He doesn't seem to be an overly involved father. Like, you know what I mean? Like, school auditoriums doesn't seem like his vibe. But look, as you point out, like, he is already complaining about having to miss his son's graduation. He's also complaining about missing the Supreme Court argument. He's complaining about not being able to campaign. He's complaining. He just wants to complain. The fact is that that a criminal defendant is out on bail as a privilege. Okay, like he's not in custody right now because he has met the requirements to not be in custody. But as a criminal defendant, there are certain obligations you have, and the minimum one, like the absolute minimum one, is to show up to your own trial every day.
Yeah.
Right. Like you cannot, like it is not an optional event. It's not like, oh yeah, this day seems really boring and I'll skip it. He has to show up to trial every day. That is actually a requirement. The judge actually had to read him his a warning that said, if you don't show up to trial, we will issue an arrest warrant and you will be, you'll be arrested. So look, he is not, the judge has not yet actually denied the request to go to his graduation. But I think the judge will deny it because, as he can't miss the trial, and it would meaning that the jury is inconvenienced because the jury would then have to take that day off. So I think Barron will have to live with the indignity of Donald Trump not sleeping in the audience during his trial. There
is also some irony in the fact that all of this is happening. This trial right now is happening because just weeks or months after Barron himself was born, Donald Trump decided to have an affair with a woman named Stormy Daniels, who he then would pay hush money to in an illegal campaign finance scheme. And that is the very issue that he's on trial for right now. So, I mean, like, spare us the Father of the Year routine.
Yeah, it's also, by the way, really interesting. And I don't know if you've noticed this. It hasn't been widely reported, but I think it's really important for people out there who are watching the trial to note is, as far as I can tell, neither Melania nor Barron nor any of the other Trump kids have actually shown up to stand by their father at the trial, which is like the bare minimum of like criminal defendant sort of posturing, right? Which is that when you are on trial, the least you want is your family sitting behind you so that the jury and the judge and everyone sees that there is someone in the world who cares about you, like your wife, your children. He apparently can't even muster that. So I don't think that, as you say, he's going to win Father of the Year award. And I think his family seems to be voting with its feet.
Yeah, exactly. Trump is also claiming that he's heard many legal scholars because, as you must know, Mark, Donald Trump is very attuned to the intricacies of the world of legal scholarship.
He hangs out with legal scholars.
That this case shouldn't have even been brought. Can you discuss why this case should have been brought and why it is especially strong?
So I actually saw this post, not tweet, whatever it is that he posted, and then he said it orally this morning. So I went actually looking for the legal scholars. Like I was trying to figure out like who the hell he's even talking about. So it's like Jonathan Turley he mentioned.
Of course.
Which
the rubber stamp for any conservative position. Find Jonathan Turley.
Jonathan Turley is just Mike Lindell with tenure, right? like if Jonathan Turley made pillows and didn't have a guaranteed job at George Washington Law School, like you'd be
They'd be the same guy.
You'd be like, which, right? Yeah. Like which one is like somewhere below Overstock.com guy would be Jonathan Turley. Look, there is no legal scholar who knows anything about campaign finance law, who knows anything about New York criminal law, who thinks that this case shouldn't have been brought. This is a relatively straightforward case, which is why Donald Trump is so panicked about it, because as you pointed out, it is pretty much without doubt that he had an affair with Stormy Daniels. As you point out, the timing of it is somewhat inconvenient for the Father of the Year award. That he also, let's not forget, had an affair with another woman. That other woman was paid hush money by the National Enquirer. How do we know that? Because the National Enquirer will say, publisher will say that that's what happened. And Stormy Daniels was paid hush money. How do we know that? Because there are checks to Stormy Daniels signed by Donald Trump, and Michael Cohen will testify to that. So the underlying facts around this are actually not in dispute. So I don't think that he's going to win on the legal scholar front. I suspect that his lawyers are going to have to come up with something better than that, whatever it may be.
Can you also speak on the fact that Michael Cohen went to prison for the same scheme that was directed by the guy who's currently the defendant on trial right now.
Yeah, look, this is the one place where I actually can't believe I'm going to say I agree with Michael Cohen on something. But it's really shameful that the federal prosecutors didn't prosecute Donald Trump. I'm not going to join into the whole where was Merrick Garland, because I actually don't think this had anything to do with Merrick Garland. I think this was the Southern District of New York. They make their own prosecution decisions around this, but it is inexplicable how it was that Michael Cohen, who was the lawyer who arranged for these checks to be delivered, wound up being prosecuted, but Donald Trump, who was his client and who actually signed the checks, wasn't. I think that that is going to be, history is going to look back on that and not just find it curious, but it's going to say that was actually kind of like the original sin of failing to treat seriously the crimes that Donald Trump had committed, because that case should have been, that case could have been brought a long time ago and it would have been a slam dunk.
We got to finish with this. I need to get your thoughts on drowsy Don falling asleep mid-trial.
I mean, okay, first of all, the fact that he is falling asleep in the middle of the afternoon now a couple of days in a row, I think tells you everything you need to know about him.
That's right. And we're recording this on Tuesday. This video will be released on Tuesday. We are now 2 of 2 reporters coming out and saying that he is falling asleep at his own criminal trial, which one might think would be a pretty momentous occasion for a normal person. But this guy is so steeped in his own criminality that he can't even stay awake for being on trial for 34 criminal counts.
Right. So that's the thing, right? So look, he's an old man. He is suffering, obviously, from some mental decline, and he's very low energy, right? He's very low energy. Jeb Bush looks at him and says, "You are very low energy." But what is sort of shocking about this is that usually a criminal defendant on trial at the beginning of the case, like when they're doing jury selection, there's a lot of adrenaline rushing. Why? Because you're sitting in a courtroom while people are sitting across from you answering questions about whether or not they are going to decide whether or not you go to prison or not. So usually this is a very high adrenaline motion. Usually the problem, and I've tried criminal cases, so I have firsthand experience with this. Usually the problem as a criminal defense lawyer is keeping your client sort of in their seat. So like if you had asked me what would have been the problems on day 1 and 2, it would have been that Donald Trump was like mouthing things or like jumping out of his seat or insisting on objecting. Instead, he's falling asleep. He's drooling. He's like nodding off and drooling. I really think something must be medically wrong with him. Because it's literally his criminal trial. So there you go.
Yeah, well, mentally add that to the long list of issues with Donald Trump right here. I know.
Well, he started doing this thing also, where he like starts down a road and he doesn't get lost so much as he just like starts making up words. So it'll be like, I went to North Carolina and then Pennsylvania and like it's
And he has too much of an ego to ever correct himself, so he just commits to the absurdity and just gets lost on this like track of just not even sounding like a human being.
Yeah.
So, of course, I know that you and the folks at Democracy Docket will be covering this trial in its entirety. So for those watching right now, if you want to support the work that Marc and his team do, please make sure to sign up for Democracy Docket. It's the free news outlet Marc founded to focus on everything voting elections. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.